Well, all this week, we've been profiling in-depth next-gen coverage here at Farm Journal, a focus on the next generation in order to help those decision makers succeed in every way. But it's also a way to remind those older generations that they have a legacy worth transitioning to the next generation, even if that decision can be difficult and full of emotions. Endless pastures of green. This can be a rare sight for Kansas cattle producers this time of year.
When it comes to that, I mean, moisture is everything.
Between improved pasture conditions and record cattle prices,
it's a breath of fresh air for us.
Brigham Stewart is optimistic.
In terms of these cattle prices, all you can be is happy. All you can do is maybe smile about it right now because, I mean, eventually there might be a setback. Hopefully not. Hopefully it holds. Hopefully it stays together.
Brigham knows he's witnessing history and at a point that could change the cattle industry for years to come.
We'll still breed 200 and some replacement heifers this year, still in it for the long haul, but obviously with the cattle market like it is, it's awesome. It's a good outlook. You know, tomorrow may be another day.
The long haul is something the Stewarts know well. A fifth-generation family farm, these fields weren't always focused on cattle.
My grandpa and grandma started it or had the farm, and it was solely farming. You know, grandpa would feed some cattle out, but I was just always a part of it, always wanted to be a part of it.
And it's the cattle piece of the operation that became a lifeline for the family during the crisis of the 1980s.
We're big in cattle, and that's kind of what saved us. Got us out of the 80s was cattle, literally specialty markets and selling them at a premium. It pretty much got us out of the spin. It would have been probably over.
The operation was growing enough that someone else needed to come back to the farm, and Brigham was the man for the job.
It's an interesting dynamic to our family. I got an older brother, it's a vet, and a younger brother, it's a lawyer, and I always joke around, I was like, I'm chopped liver, you know, like, but I'm not, you know, I'm happy with my decisions and glad to be here on the farm. 3
successful sons, each paving their own path.
Yeah, you know that song, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Well, it worked, except for one, and he came back. Thank goodness, yes.
Raising boys and cattle is all Debbie Stewart knows, and it's a tradition she's proud to carry on.
I just really think it's the best way to raise kids. They have a love of the land. They have love for the animals. They're responsible, and that's a really rare trait now.
From Brigham's uncle and cousins to others who are part of this family farm, the next generation is at work today, but the official plan for the future isn't on paper just yet.
The transition plans, it's up in the air. I mean, it's a large operation, and there's, you know, family partners involved and stuff. So it's like any family operation. It's unknown at the moment, but at the same time, you just keep pushing forward. You forget about that.
When it comes to succession planning in agriculture, the Stewarts aren't alone. Farm Journal surveyed next-gen farmers and found nearly 60% of younger farmers surveyed say they don't have a formal succession plan in place.
You have worked with a lot of different families across the country that are in different spots in their transition plan. But overall, why would you say it is so hard for farm families to put a formal transition plan in place?
Number one is it's big and scary, right? You know, farming is so core to the identity of our producers that they don't want to contemplate a day when they're not doing it.
Shannon Farrell is an agricultural law professor at Oklahoma State University who specializes in estate planning. He says the second biggest challenge for farm families is the fact most are small family-owned businesses who rely on farm assets.
Any sort of dynamic, let's say we have a farm kid and a city kid, and we're looking at maybe having to split those assets up. Well, we're looking at breaking apart that critical mass of assets that are needed for a profitable operation. And so we kind of don't want to contemplate that.
When you look at a transition plan, it's really emotional for some families. Yes. And a lot of them say, listen, I don't want to do it because I know it's not going to be fair. Is it meant to be fair, Rena?
The short answer is no. It is very hard to make it fair because if you split the assets equally, there is an emotional component to it that will feel unfair to someone. So it is really hard to achieve fair in all aspects.
Rena Striegel is president of Transition Point Business Advisors, who helps farm families across the country. And she says when it comes to transition plans, they're often packed with misconceptions.
But if I had to break it down like into a fairly simple 1 or 2 sentences, I think it would be that we still have the concept that succession planning can be handled through an estate plan. And it is so much more complex than that.
She says estate plans are essential, especially for next-gen farmers.
But the challenge with the estate plan is it does not address any of the decisions that are being made while everyone is still alive, which is where we find a lot of the tension and some of the family challenges that happen is how are we operating today and doing those lifetime transitions as opposed to what will happen when the owners pass away.
And Striegel says it's important to remember that transition plans are a sign of leadership within the operation.
And I always tell them that the biggest legacy that you will leave the family is the legacy of transition planning.
Farrell says it's never too early to start a transition plan.
I think the farm families that are at greatest risk of not having a plan are young families, because those young families are probably pretty highly leveraged if they're getting started in the business.
Striegel says if she has one piece of advice for farmers, it's to make 2025 your year to put a plan in place.
Stop putting it off. You need to be having decisions made very regularly and very frequently. And to put it off and put it off and put it off, all that does is delay, and it creates more stress, it creates more tension, it creates more uncertainty.
And Farrell's biggest piece of advice isn't when to start a plan, it's the emotional piece of it.
I think for all generations, it's just really important to approach this topic without fear, right? And I know that's easier said than done, but if you're the senior generation, I know that being a farmer and rancher is core to your identity, and I do not want to take that away from you. But I want you to envision a future where you are still actively engaged with the operation and you're providing your lifetime of experience to that next generation who is slowly moving in to a management position with your guidance and your experience there alongside them. And that's rewarding for you and for them.
Well, as I mentioned, our Next Gen coverage has been happening all week, from success stories to those who've overcome challenges to more tips and advice for a successful transition. You can find all of that on agweb.com. When we come back, another Chinese national was arrested and accused of smuggling something that could impact agriculture. That's in Ag Around the World next.